Hey everyone, something that I have noticed in my own practice and my own healing journey, and something I love to incorporate with my work with clients, is about the doshas. So this is about getting to the root of your unique body's constitution and your energetic patterns in order to tailor your recommendations for both, herbs and plant medicines, and food and lifestyle behaviors to bring you better into balance. So again, this is something that I really love to incorporate with my work with clients and has been really helpful for me along my healing journey, especially kind of figuring out why certain, herbs or foods just didn't seem to work for me, even though they were good for the condition that I had. So once I started bringing in the knowledge of the doshas and my constitution and finding things that matched or balanced my constitution, then things started to really move, which was exciting. So I wanted just to take a few minutes and introduce this idea of the doshas to you guys in case you haven't heard of this before. And this is just going to be a very brief overview. There's so much more to learn that I could talk about, but we'll save that for later, or you can book a session with me and we can go in more depth. So the doshas, this is a pretty common thing in Ayurveda. This is, the ancient healing tradition of India and that part of the world. They really look at the person's energetic patterns and constitutions through the lens of the elements. So, traditional Chinese medicine does this as well. They have a little bit different element system, but today I want to talk about the doshas. There's 3 doshas, and we'll go through all those together right now. So when we think about the element theory, I'll talk about which ones are in play with each dosha. So we have, again, 3 of them. One of them is called Vata, the second one is called Pitta, and the third is called Cava. So you may have heard these before. Maybe you've taken a quiz on what's your dosha, but I really think that these offer a really fun and unique and in-depth way of looking at the body and looking at the energy patterns of the body. And most of the time, depending on your doshas, and because we all have all 3, we don't just have one. We usually just have one that's primary. So again, you're not just going to be 100% one of these. You're going to have a little bit of all of them. But based on your primary dosha, you may be susceptible to certain symptoms or disease patterns, as well as mental and emotional patterns too, which is really fascinating. So I'll just go through these really quickly, each one. So we'll start with Vata. So Vata is the combination of the air and ether element. So when we think of air and ether, we think of, wind and movement. So Vata tends to be very cold and very dry. And other aspects of this dosha are the constricted tissue state. So when we think of wind is going to come through, it's going to dry you out, it's going to shrivel you up, it's going to tighten the tissues. So Vata is, again, cold, dry, and tense, generally are the 3 kind of indicators of Vata. So, and from a mental and emotional point of view, if you know anything about the elements, the air element is about the mind. And the air element is also very active and moving. So these people who are predominantly Vata tend to be anxious, preoccupied, have a lot of thoughts running through their head, are all up here, their energy's all up here in this part of the body, tend to be, kind of overthinkers, list makers, so there's a lot of that kind of mental and emotional pattern to the Vata constitution or the Vata dosha. So I'll move on now to the Pitta. So Pitta is the combination of fire and sometimes it's called oil. So when we think about the water element or the hydration element, there's water and there's oil as part of that. So I like to think of Pitta dosha as like the oil and the fire element. So pittas tend to be, you know, hot and fiery and motivated and strong and athletic, but are prone to these kind of heat diseases. So when we think of pitta, we can think of pitta as also an imbalance or a deficiency of vata and kapha. So when we have primarily fire and oil, which is like a fuel for the fire, things, you know, disease patterns or symptoms generally follow that. So there's usually a lot of redness and heat and inflammation and yeah, that kind of pattern seems to show up with people who are predominantly pitta. And when you think of like the fire element, when it comes from like a mental and emotional point of view, this is, you know, pitta dominant people are generally very active, very assertive, tend to, you know, anger easily or get frustrated easily, but are generally pretty motivated, pretty driven. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the pitta constitution. And the last one, the third one, is called vata, or not vata, kapha. So kapha from the elemental perspective is kind of the combination of water and earth. So vata people tend to be a little bit heavier, slower moving, tend to have more disease and symptom patterns that are related to like that heavier water stagnation. So a lot of like swelling, edema, sluggishness, fatigue, you know, slow digestion, and are generally just a much, I mean, they can be very calm and very grounded, but also just very stagnant and slow moving. And when you think of, you know, water and earth from a emotional and mental point of view, they can be very, very emotional and sensitive, perhaps a little emotionally volatile, or, you know, very susceptible to depression and apathy and these kinds of things. So again, to kind of sum up, we have the three doshas: vata, which is the, you know, air and ether element; pitta, which is the fire and oil, or fire and water; and then kapha, which is the water and earth. So depending on your unique, you know, your doshas, like I said, you'll have all three, but most of us have one predominant. Some people have two predominant. And there's like quizzes and stuff online or in books that you can take if you want to learn more about your dosha. But this is something that I do with clients, with client intakes as well, because this has been really helpful for me understanding, you know, your unique tissue state and being able to find the herbs and foods and things that are going to balance that. So that's something we could work on as well together, but I'm very curious to hear about your experience and what your doshas are and what you feel like, or how you feel they manifest in your life or your health. So leave me a comment below and tell me about your experience with your doshas, or if you have questions about doshas, I will do my best to answer them. And of course, if you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'll be making lots more health and spirituality videos to come. But in the meantime, my friends, take good care, and I'll see you next time. Bye!